This is a tutorial on how to use Trello for your church's intranet. Trello, for those of you that are not familiar with the tool, it's a web-based tool, although they do have applications for Windows and for Mac, that allows you to organize information, do planning, which makes it a nice candidate for a lot of things that a church might do. There are a lot of different ways to use Trello. It's based on a bulletin board concept where you can have as many boards as you want around different topics or functional areas. And in each board, as you see we have here, you can have what are called lists. That's these vertical columns that go across. You can add as many of those as you like. And in those lists, you have cards. And these cards have a front and a back. If you click on a card, it will pop open and show you what's on the quote-unquote back of it. And that's really where the power is, I think, for Trello, is the individual card, because you can see that there are many things that you can do with a card. Not only can you give it a title, you can also give it a description. There can be comments that are added to it. There's some powerful features built within just the comments function. It tells you or gives you a running activity of all the things that have been done to a card, which is kind of nice. And then many other things that you can add to a card, including assign members, give it labels, provide checklists, due dates, add attachments. And there's a lot of different other power-ups or additional items or functionality that you can add to your Trello system. And that might depend on whether you have the free version of Trello or whether you have a paid version of Trello, how many of those power-ups you can add and which types of power-ups. And then there's a number of actions that you can do to an individual card. You can move them, copy them, keep an eye on them, tuck them away in an archive, or simply share them. So let's talk about how these concepts of boards, lists, and cards could be used for a church-wide intranet. Now, the intranet that we're talking about probably has a limited number of people attached to it, maybe those people involved in specific areas of ministry. So we're really not talking about an area that would be just members or all members. We're talking about more ministry-focused activities and kind of a smaller subset. There are other web-based solutions that would maybe be better for allowing many people, like an entire membership, to have kind of a behind-the-scenes look at church content, but this is a little bit different. So what we've done here is we've created a sample. We've called it Wells Tech Church Intranet Sample. And this might be an example of a landing page, a place that the leadership would go, the areas of ministry would go, let's say the church president or church secretary, pastors, etc., could go to begin working with the content that is contained on the church intranet. We've provided a couple of instructional cards, why an intranet and why Trello, why they might be, or why you might want to have an intranet and why you might want to use Trello to contain it. And then it's made up of these different lists. And the first list here is subboards. The concept that we're suggesting with using Trello is potentially creating not just one big board where you'd have many lists, which might be a little bit unmanageable after a period of time. Breaking it down into subboards where you can simply create a board around a particular process. So, for instance, we've created a ministry event planning subboard. And on the card here that says Site Board Map, we've added a description with links to some example subboards. So in our sample site, we've included this ministry event planning, which we had created a while back. So we've linked to it here. I've given you a sample church council board, so maybe the church council or your board of elders might want to create a board just for their exclusive use, which you could permission it so sensitive material could sit there. And then you maybe would have other boards that would collect other information, like groups. So let's take a look at one of these subgroups, and then we'll come back and revisit the different things that you can do on this board. So we're going to go to, let's say, the Church Council subgroup, and all I have to do is click on the link here. I also, again, have it all indexed up here. So let's go to Church Council. It'll open that up. You can change the color background if you want to theme them so you can distinguish one from another. I've kept them all the same color so we can kind of see that they're part of the same group. And again, you see this familiar concept. We have lists and we have cards in lists. So a church council might have a meeting minutes list, official documents, and then maybe a list for each area that's represented on the church council: evangelism, adult discipleship, elders. To create a new list, let's say we want to add youth ministry or youth discipleship, we could simply do that. Discipleship. So that's as easy as it is to create another list. And then let's take a look at some of these cards, which kind of shows off some of the features that are available within Trello. So for instance, meeting minutes. So we've got an example here of a card from earlier this year, January 11th, meeting minutes. We can click on that to show the back of the card. You can add due dates, and potentially you could use that to show the date of the meeting, the date and the time of the meeting, which can be displayed on a calendar. You have a description area. You simply click in there and you can type anything you like. By the way that you format things is with something called Markdown language, which is actually a very simple way to highlight text, etc. And you can kind of see some instructions there. You can add attachments. So in this case, we've added a PDF that actually had lived on a Google Drive site. So if we click on this, we can see that it goes to drive.google.com and then shows that document. So it's very easy to add an attachment. And I mentioned before, you can add comments and all kinds of other things. It's easy to add a card. You simply click Add Another Card. And let's say we want to add one under evangelism. And we'll say that evangelism is going to provide a report to the next council meeting. And that maybe is March 26th. And you simply add the card, hit enter, and then you can go to the back of the card and add your content. So if it's an attachment, you can simply do that. And you can attach many things: computer files, some of those items that are on your computer, other cards from Trello, things that are on Google Drive, Dropbox, Box, OneDrive, or a link to any content that's out there as well. So it's very easy to add that. And so what you would do here is add all the council members into the board so that they would have access to this and they can see all of the cards that have been added, read through the reports from other areas of ministry, see the meeting agenda, those kinds of things. The way to add people is actually very simple. We simply click this icon right here, Invite to Board, and you can see all of the other people maybe in your organization, or you can start from scratch if somebody isn't already in Trello. I'll just send this to another one of my email addresses, and I'll just click Send Invitation. And in a minute, let me go ahead and open that up so you see what that invitation looks like. I'll have to log in here to that account. And there's the invitation from me to me, of course, and gives you a nice little image that suggests that it's from Trello. It says I've been invited to the church council board on Trello. And then a link to go to the board, and I can create an account, and then I'll have access as a member of that board. You can kind of see that I've been added here. I can add that person to the team. I can change permissions to observer or normal or admin. Observers can just view cards and can be allowed to comment, react, and vote to cards, but you can't edit cards or move cards or change any of the other settings. By default, people that are invited are in the normal mode or member mode. You can view and edit cards, change some of the board settings. So that's how you get people into the board. We've created a board. We've created a list and a card. Let's create a sample board. Let's say that the elders want their own board. Now, they can still be here and provide their reports to the church council board, but let's maybe say they want to work on stuff themselves on their own board with their own permissioning and own documents. Very easy to do that. We simply click on board, scroll to the bottom, create new board. We just give it a title. We'll call it Wells Tech Church Intranet Elders, and we'll just label this sample so we don't get it confused. And you have some options here. You can create teams. We're not going to create it to a team at this point. We'll keep it out of that. And you have some private or public options. So if you want the board to remain private, you can do that. All of the samples that we provided are public, but if you want to copy these boards and use them, you can do that. You just want to be careful how you permission it. So you do have private or public. Usually with an intranet, you're going to keep it private. We're going to set it to public, and it gives you a little bit of warning. We're going to make the board public, and I'm going to give it that same orange color as before, and I'm going to go ahead and create the board. And this is what a board fresh out of the box looks like. And we can begin adding lists, so we can say agendas and meeting minutes and visits. Let's say the elders might want to keep track of their visits, and they would maybe add a card per visit. So actually very simple. Now if we wanted to link this elder board back to our main intranet board, we simply would go over to Show Menu and go to More, and then we have a link right here to this board. We'll go ahead and copy that. And let's go back to our main intranet board, which is I think right here. And then we will go ahead and add another card. We'll call this Elders. Let's go to the back of that card, and in the description we can simply paste that link that we copied, and maybe a description here, Elders Board for their work. And you could obviously do whatever you wanted there. And if I click Save, I'm going to immediately get that little link there. I can close it by clicking the X or clicking off. So I'm going to click on Elders. I can go to the Elder board, and there's where we were working on. Go back. Let's look at a couple more things on the main board here. And then before we leave, I want to talk a little bit about this ministry event planning board. Main board, and you can develop any lists you like. I've suggested records and official documents, so church constitution, resolutions. You can maybe even put a link in here to a Google Drive folder where you store other documents, or a Dropbox folder. Those kinds of things can be added. Maybe you want to keep track of shut-in visits, so the pastors would use this area where you could create a pastor's subboard, however you wanted to do it. But I've created a shut-ins list here with some instructions. It's usually good to leave some breadcrumbs as to how to use the board and how not to, especially if you have volunteers. You want to make sure that they're comfortable with the way to do it, because there are a lot of different ways that you could use Trello. And maybe in your Shutins board you list every card as a person, which kind of speaks to the flexibility of Trello. There's lots of ways that you can organize content and use cards. In this case, in this list, we wanted to use a card for a person. In this list, we wanted to use a card for a document. In this list, a card for a board. In this list, a card for an instruction set. So let's look at Gene Bilson here. And we'll go to the back of his card. And let's say in his case, we wanted to use, in Shutin's case, we wanted to use the comments as a way to note that a visit was made. So it's very easy to do that. You simply type in the click and type in the comments field. And I added one here just for demonstration. Visited Gene for 30 minutes, gave communion, good spirits, good health. And you can tell when I did that. So it's always going to date them. So if I look at this tomorrow, it's going to give me the date. So I can have a running history of my visitations with Gene. And that's all through the comments section. Also in comments, you can add attachments and other links, etc. I use the due date function here for the next time that I should be visiting Gene. So you could put the first of the month. So if you wanted to put April 1st, saying, you know, that's a visit in April, or prescribe a date, then you can also get a notification for that. The way you would get notifications is to add yourself to the card. So I can go to members here. There are no members on this card, but if I go to members and I add myself, then my name appears right here on the card. And if there's a due date, I'll get a notification at some point before the due date, and that's configurable, when this is due. So that'll come in my email as just a reminder. You notice another thing that's here is a label. And there are a bunch of different labels that you can use, and they can be by color. I just created a couple labels for this list. Actually, the labels apply to the entire board, which gives you some filtering capabilities. I call it SI for Shut-in Group A, Shut-in Group B. Let's say you rotate your shut-ins by pastor or by the frequency of the visit. So Group A, they get visited every other week, or Group A and Group B gets visited every month or every 2 months. You can set it up however you want. Now, because I've got this Group A and Group B, I can change them. I can remove one or another. So if I go to Labels, I can say, well, I don't want Group A anymore. I'm going to put Gene in Group B. And now Gene is in Group B. Let's change him back because I want to demonstrate filtering. I can close the card here. And one of the great features of using this, and you can click on this to see what the name of the group is, but there are all kinds of crazy, powerful search functions that are available here. So I could just say, show me any card with Bilson on it, and I would see the Bilson card, and I could go right to that card. But I can also filter down. If you have a lengthy list here, you could filter this down using the filter cards function. I can say, just show me the shut-in Group A cards. So if I click on that, then all the other cards will disappear, and all I'll have is the Group A cards. So labels are extremely powerful. I can turn the filter off right here and get all my cards back. Cards can be dragged around from one area to another. They can be reordered if you wanted to do that very simply, clicking and dragging. Just a very flexible tool. Let me show you one last thing before we go to the Ministry Event Planning Board, which is very full-featured. I'm going to go into the Church Constitution card. And I give a little bit of a description. I have an attachment for the Constitution itself. And this could be a Word doc so that you could open it, edit it, and save it back. Checklists are very powerful. You can create any kind of checklist you want and can have numerous checklists or lists per card. In this case, I felt I wanted to put the steps needed to amend the Constitution or amend the bylaws. And you can add as many steps as you like. And it's as simple as adding an item and typing and then clicking add. These can be checked off or unchecked, and you can kind of get this running total of how far you are. This is great for project work where you have a series of steps you need to take for any particular item. You can copy these checklists to other areas. So I've got a checklist here, but if I wanted to add a checklist over here, I could add this checklist, or I could simply give it a new name here, and then copy items from a different checklist. And it knows that I've got this other checklist over here. I click add, and I've got that. So if you've got checklists that are useful for different functions or actions that you take as a ministry worker, it's very easy to add that. I'm going to go ahead and delete the whole list here since I don't need to do that. Let's take a look then finally at the ministry event planning board. So I'm going to go in here and go to that board. This is a board we worked on, Sally and I worked on a while back. Actually, Sally did all the work, so thank you, Sally. But this is a great way to kind of think about ministry events. And you can, again, see the concept of lists and grouping by different things. So in this case, we have a look ahead, we have in progress, we have kind of a master events list, we have different groups, and we're making heavy use of dates here. And that's really helpful when trying to do ministry scheduling. This calendar function is one of those power-ups I was talking about before. If you enable it for your board and you have dates on your board, then it's easy enough to take a look at the calendar by date. So I'm going to open up the calendar. If I go up a month, so I know that there were some dates in 2018, and you can see them starting to filter in. Very helpful if you're trying to do some planning and figuring out, boy, I have a lot of stuff going on this month. I may have trouble resourcing all that. Maybe we want to rethink that. So you can have this out for a year or a quarter or however you want to do it. It's really a flexible tool. You can have repeating cards so that they can appear on the calendar in a repeating way, something that happens every quarter or every month, those kinds of things, and it's really helpful to do that. I think that repeating function, again, is one of those power-ups that you can add. So the base system has a lot of functionality, but when you add power-ups, you really have the ability to slice and dice your information and make this a true church intranet and a productivity tool. Let's go back quickly to our Church Intranet page again and just close out the tutorial. So again, just in review, you have a lot of different capabilities from permissioning to organizing your content to linking from card to card, for adding things to the back of cards, including as many attachments as you like, due dates, checklists, organizing by labels, adding comments, tracking activity, all kinds of tools that I think would make a church intranet a successful one if it were put in the hands of the Trello tool. One other item that we should probably close with, however, is how to use this board if you wanted to copy this board for your own use. And that's actually very simple as well. You simply go over to Show Menu, and you have this Copy Board function. Give it whatever title you want. If you have a team, you can assign it to a team. You can change whether it's private or public. And you can also tell it whether to keep the cards, and in this case you'd probably want to as a starting point, and then go from there.